Hello everybody and welcome to another video. In this one I'm sharing my tres leches cake, and tres leches means 3 milks. And I'm going to talk about those in a second, but let's get started first with the sponge cake recipe. And the choice for sponge cake is a pretty classical one. I'm going for something that is very light and airy and has no added fat in the content. So there's no butter in the sponge cake at all. That's because I'm gonna add my 3 milks later and let it soak in the sponge. And this way you cut out a lot of the fat. There are obviously some versions nowadays where you make it with any sort of cake. And it works. It's a bit heavy, but it also works. So I mentioned that I want a very light and airy sponge cake. And for that, we have sifted our dry ingredients, and now I'm working on separating my eggs into egg whites and egg yolks. And this is gonna help build in more air into the batter. And once you've done that, you wanna start beating your egg whites until you reach soft peaks. Now you could do this by hand, but honestly that's so much work. So I'm actually just using a hand mixer. You can also use a stand-up mixer, whatever is most comfortable for you. So I wrote stiff peaks, but you can already start incorporating some sugar if you get soft peaks. And just add it very slowly, very gently. Just keep beating as you add the sugar. So once I'm done with that and I get this peaks that I'm showing here, then I can add my egg yolks. I add one at a time. There's a bit of fat in the egg yolk, so in principle you could deflate all that air that you've built in. But if you do it one at a time and very carefully, then there's no risk. And this is basically all the air that you're gonna get in this cake batter. Once you've finished incorporating the egg yolks, then you're ready to add your dry ingredients. Now in this recipe, I also add a little bit of milk with my dry ingredients, just because it makes it easier to incorporate. And this is the texture that you're looking for, something rather stiff that holds its shape. Now I do like a little bit of vanilla flavor in my sponge cake. This is optional, I would say. You can also add the vanilla to the 3 milks mixture, which I actually also do, but you can just forget about it and during the cake preparation and do it later on in case you forget. Now I'm gonna add a little bit of my sifted flour and continue to mix this with my hand mixer. At this point, I decided to switch to my spatula. You know, sometimes I like to switch from whisking into my hand mode, and using a spatula, I can just fold the batter. And folding the batter means you are more gentle and preserving that air that you've built. I'm adding some whole milk just because it got too stiff and you feel like you need to add a little liquid to the batter. But that's it on the cake. That was super easy to make. And now I'm just gonna put it in my pan. I like to use a rectangular shaped pan. In this case, I have an 8 by 8 inch, so it's a square pan actually, and it fits my cake batter perfectly. So I'm only greasing the pan ever so slightly. I'm not actually using any parchment or anything, because I'm gonna leave the cake in this container throughout the rest of the process. And you gotta make sure that you're scooping all of that batter out. You don't want to leave any behind. You don't need to tap this. You can just take it straight to the oven, 180 for about 18 to 20 minutes. It's really, really quick to bake. You know that it's ready when it has this golden brown color, and if you touch the surface, it will spring back. That's the typical sponge cake signature. Now, the tres leches soak is indeed a mixture of 3 types of milks. And for the sake of this video, yes, let's assume that whipping cream is a milk, okay? So the typical filling is actually some condensed milk. This is sweetened condensed milk. And you have equal parts of condensed milk, whole milk, or evaporated milk, and some whipping cream. I think the classic mixture is actually condensed milk, evaporated milk, and whole milk. But I did not have any evaporated milk, therefore I went with whipping cream. And here's your chance to add that vanilla flavor. This is quite optional. You can also just have the milk flavor in. I like to add vanilla to everything, to be honest, so I'm gonna go for it. And just give this a nice and quick mix until that condensed milk is fully dissolved into the other milks. Everything is, by the way, cold, and I'm ready to add this to my sponge cake. And before we do that, there's a quick technique that you should try when you soak a cake. And basically you want to make sure that your sponge cake will absorb evenly all of that mixture. So first of all, I'm loosening the edges of my cake, and I'm taking this toothpick, or you can even use a chopstick if you like, and just piercing all over my cake. Again, you want to be as even as possible. It doesn't matter if you have holes everywhere, to be honest, it doesn't matter, because we're gonna cover this with some whipped cream in the end. Yes, more whipped cream. So now at this point, make sure that the sponge cake has completely cooled. And if it has, and it's at room temperature, then feel free to pour in all of that tres leches goodness. And you can see how it's gonna start absorbing it almost immediately. You can help it out a little bit with an offset spatula and just try to be even throughout the cake. It does look like a lot of liquid, and you will not believe how much this thing actually absorbs. And some people like it completely soaking wet. So you could actually make more of this soak if you are one of those people. I'm just gently pressing also to check if I have enough of it. And once I'm happy with that, I can just cover the top of the cake and put it in the fridge to chill. You can chill it overnight or at least 30 minutes. And this gives us time to prepare our frosting. You cannot have tres leches without a whipped cream frosting. And this is just a very quick whipped cream recipe. I have some whipping cream. This is at least 35%. And to that you add a couple tablespoons of icing sugar just to sweeten it up. And you guessed it, some vanilla flavor. Make sure that you sift that icing sugar because it tends to clump up. And a really good tip that I can give you when it comes to making whipped cream is that the cream should be super cold. And I even put my container and my beaters in the freezer before I start so that it whips up really quickly. So once you've waited your 30 minutes or overnight, then you're ready to frost this cake. And this is a sheet cake, so that means you're just gonna bake it and eat it out of this tray, okay? So I'm gonna be rather generous with this. I don't like a lot of whipped cream on my tres leches cake, but some people do. Again, if you are one of those people, then you can easily double the batch. And I'm just gonna spread the whipped cream all over my cake. Just trying to cover as much as possible. And you can stop right here. I mean, tres leches is a rather rustic cake to eat. You can just try to create some sort of pattern on the frosting, like do some swirls like I'm showing here. Or just leave it as it is. You don't have to be perfect. One thing I've seen and I really enjoyed is to decorate this with some dulce de leche or caramel. And yes, we're building on those leche flavors, right? So this is burnt milk. If you ever had dulce de leche, then you know that it's a really complex flavor of burnt milk and sugar. So I'm just trying to take my tres leches cake to the next level in terms of flavor depth, okay? You don't have to do this if you don't have dulce de leche or caramel. Don't worry about it. You're still gonna get the real deal here. So I'm only gonna drizzle a couple tablespoons of this. And again, you can get creative with this. You don't have to do much. I'm not actually super happy with it, but it's gonna taste great. So, if you've ever cut a cake out of one of these square baking pans, you know that it's kind of a pain. And you also know that the first slice is not the prettiest one. So I'm gonna try to get that one out, but I'm only gonna show you the second slice, okay? I have an offset spatula, which really helps for this sort of task. And for my better slice, I'm just using the spatula to cut this. You don't even need a knife, really. And thanks to the soak of the tres leches, you find that the cake is not going to stick to the pan. You can easily just pick it up, release, and dig in. And if you have never had tres leches cake, then you are missing out. You really have to try this recipe. It's super popular, especially in Latin America. And I actually got this recipe from my mom because she makes the best tres leches cake. And it's such a crowd pleaser. You can thank my mom for this one, guys. I hope you like it. And if you do, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like the video, and share it. Thanks, and see you next time.